Welcome back to the latest edition of the Inside Line IndyCar Podcast presented by Indy Star. I am sports editor Aaron Ferguson, joined by Indy Star Motorsports insider Zion Brown before he heads to sweet home Alabama. And Zion, it's much warmer today than it was when we spoke last week, and I think there's some borderline snow pellets falling then here in Indy's, but it's feeling like spring and almost early summer to a degree. You get a chance to get out and enjoy this, or are you just acclimated from all your warm travels the past 4 weeks?
No, make no mistake. I have gotten out in some capacity, I think, every day this week. I think after we're done here, I'll go on a little walk as well. But no, feels nice. A little concerning, right? I saw the other day when it was on Sunday, it was like 88 at one point here in Indianapolis. And I think that was the highest it's ever been. I think I saw it in March or April. I don't know. Somebody may have to fact check me on that. But I think it was the warmest it's ever been in either of these 2 months in Indianapolis ever. So it felt good. However, concerns about what that might mean for the earth. But no, it feels great up this week here.
Yeah, nothing like going from mid 80s to mid 20s within like not even 24 hours. That's just the Midwest way. We're just built different here.
For sure.
Well, if you didn't listen to the last episode, I highly recommend it. We went in great detail about all of the things, man, like Arlington, TV ratings, promotion of the races. We hashed out kind of like the NASCAR split versus not having the NASCAR series in Arlington. Talked about catering, Zion's best eats of the trip. We talked about a ton. So highly recommend to listen to that if you're looking for that, like kind of a recap of the first 3 races. This one's mostly going to be about Barber, and that's where Zion is heading out this weekend. We're here recording Wednesday, so maybe you're catching us in practice and qualifying has already happened. And we appreciate you listening anytime you do choose to listen to us. And so kind of resetting things, the IndyCar season's been kind of crazy, like a lot of parity that obviously we didn't have last year. We have 8 drivers within 50 points of the leader, the leader being Kyle Kirkwood at 126, Alex Palou behind him at 26 points back. Pato O'Ward is tied with Joseph Newgarden. They're 33 points back. Scott McLaughlin, 41. David Malukas, 42 back. Christian Lundgaard, 46 back. Marcus Ericsson, 49 back. So really you have a lot of diversity, not just in drivers, but teams, engines. Of course, the 3 Penske's are in the top 6. Just kind of a fascinating start to the season. And one stat before I throw it your way, which again, I'm kind of just going off memory here, but I think after 3 races last year, there were only 3 drivers within 50 points of one another. And now we have 8. So it's been a crazy start to the year and some parity throughout. What do you make of it, Zion?
Yeah, certainly a lot different from last year when it was Alex Palou won the first 2 races, and then Kyle Kirkwood was able to beat him in Long Beach, but Palou still came second in that race. So it was a 1-1-2 star for Palou versus this year. The 24th place finish he had due to the crash between his VK and Phoenix has kind of changed things up as well. And then, of course, Kirkwood beating him again this year, this time on a street race in Arlington. So it's a lot different. We talked about it last week. 3 winners, 3 different teams. You look at the top 4 as you just kind of ran through them, all different teams, right? Kirkwood's with Andretti Global, Palou, Chip Ganassi Racing, Newgarden, Team Penske, and then you have Pato O'Ward, who just steadily has been in that top 5 in the Arrow McLaren car. So it looks a lot different than what we saw a year ago, and I think a lot of people expected that, right? You get a guy that wins 8 races in 17 races like he did last year with Palou. And I guess technically that is still possible this year, right? He still could go on a run, but it's just not something you see very often. We'd had seasons like that only, I believe, 3 times before in the history of IndyCar. So it's not something you see very often, and it's not something that I think was going to be easy to replicate in back-to-back seasons. And again, I still consider Palou as the favorite. I know in the betting markets would as well, and he's still somebody who I think it'd be shocking to not see him win at least 3 races this year. Let's just set the baseline there. So it's not like, this is a completely new set of drivers or new field or anything of that nature. But you do look at it and you say, okay, you have those 4 teams who can truly win it, right? And in the past, it's the past 5 years, basically of the 2020s, it's been between the two teams for the most part in Chip Ganassi Racing and Team Penske. Team Penske, of course, trying to bounce back from what happened last year. But you're now looking at a scenario where Pato O'Ward is trying to win his first ever championship. Kyle Kirkwood, same thing with Andretti. So you look at it and you say, okay, any of those four teams have a legitimate chance to win. And as you mentioned, all three of the Team Penske cars right now are in the top six. I think Dave Maluka is maybe a year or two early to start talking about championship hopes for him necessarily, but he is in that sixth spot. But Scott McLaughlin's certainly a guy who I think could win it for that fifth spot. And of course, we know Justin Newgarden can win it as well. So it's been fun to see the balance and the parity of the series so far. And it's really I'm really curious to see these three races before we get to the 500, how that continues or how it maybe changes a bit, to see if somebody, whether it be Palou or Kirkwood or even Pato maybe, if somebody can win two of those races and then all of a sudden it looks a little different, or if it's going to be, nobody wins more than two heading into the Indy 500. And we still have this, question mark about who is the favorite or who's kind of in the clubhouse with a chance to go for that championship push.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things about this year's calendar is it's a little bit more diversified, right? Like we had 3 races in 15 days. That wasn't the case last year, but also the style of races were different. Like you threw in a short oval with Phoenix in there, whereas usually the first oval had been the 500, or at least it was last year. And so you're tuning things a little bit differently. You have to prepare for things a little bit differently. Like I just wonder how much that may be factored into things too, right? Like last year, it was just Palou and Kirkwood kind of duking it out until the 500, which was entertaining. But, to have like that short oval, like I do think it threw a different element in that teams had to plan for, or maybe not saying they didn't plan for it, but maybe just didn't know how different it would be, especially on short order. Like that was 6 days after they raced in St. Pete. So to me, that's just fascinating. And you mentioned Pato O'Ward. Like one of the big things is he's wanted is consistency. They've talked about that on the broadcast, and he's got 3 top 5s. So, he's right there. He got a 4th place finish, 1 or 2. I did this last week too. I forget, but he's
1 4th place,
well.
2 5th.
Was that
1 4th place in Phoenix, and the other 2 are 5th place finishes.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So but he's someone who has performed well on ovals too, and those are kind of more in the somewhat backloaded part of the schedule. So he could get hot at any time, maybe starting in Indy, maybe starting this week. We'll see. So I just think it's really fascinating where kind of everything sits, because everyone has their own lane, right? Like Newgarden's won at Barber before, but he's also kind of ovals have almost become his identity and his personality, maybe not his personality, but his identity as a driver. And so, yeah. And then who knows with Malukas, man, credit to him for being 6th right now, right? You're moving up, you're still pretty young, but you're in these massive shoes because you're filling the car that was Will Powers, right? And so there's high expectations, and he's living up to them. And then there's 2 guys I want to get to, particularly Scott Dixon, who's 11th, and he really hasn't raced well to start the year, but somehow has 2 top 10s. Just think of all the different. He's gone on different strategies, but also he and his team have had some errors throughout the first 3 races. But he's got 2 top 10s, and he's sitting there 67 points back. And the other guy 67 points back is Will Power, who the first 2 weeks were just brutal, and then he comes back and gets a top 5 in Arlington. So you've got 2 really veteran drivers. Will Power obviously trying to figure out his new team and learn his personnel with Andretti Global, and he seemed like he was certainly rounding back into shape. And you can never count out Scott Dixon. He wants to win. Every driver does, but he wants to win. He's made it pretty clear that he would like to win as well.
Right, and Scott Dixon throughout his whole career, even when he was winning championships consistently, has been kind of a guy who started slower than a championship level driver usually does. He's always kind of been one of those guys who you get to the back half of the year and all of a sudden it's Scott Dixon is racking up wins and podium finishes, and all of a sudden he's winning his 6th championship, right? That's kind of been his identity for quite some time now. And so we'll see how the rest of this year pans out for him. Obviously, you mentioned some of the issues, the overall issues, he and the the team on that 9 car have had. Those need to be shored up, right, as the season continues. And then, like you said, Will Power, those are the 2 oldest guys, right, in the series. And Power's in a place where he looked most comfortable in Arlington, as you mentioned. And so when you look at him going forward, he finally got a week to kind of reassess everything. He wasn't one of those many drivers who raced in Sebring last week. Will Power got to kind of go home and figure out what needed to be corrected for him and that Andretti Global team in his first season there. And that start he got starting on January 1st. So I'm curious to see if that gives him some extra motivation or an extra oomph going forward, just that now he knows what to expect in that car. And he has a chance to really correct on some of the things that went wrong, specifically in St. Pete and in Phoenix.
Yeah, and don't want to skip over 8th and 9th because, and 10th for that matter. Marcus Ericsson's 8th, Marcus Armstrong's 9th, and Alexander Rossi's 10th. Then you've got Dixon and Power, and then rookie Dennis Hauger sitting there 13th, 76 points back. He's got a top 10. He leads the way for the rookies, and he's just been, I think. He started out really strong, right, at St. Pete, and yeah, he's just been super impressive, I feel like, to start the year.
Yeah, Hauger definitely has been, and I look at Marcus Ericsson, who you mentioned in 8th, as somebody who I am really intrigued to track throughout this entire season, not necessarily to win a championship, but just can he stay consistent, stay in that top 10, maybe even reach up to that top 5 in the points at one point, because I mean, everybody has seen the way the start of Ericsson's Andretti tenure has gone. It hasn't been great. And so this year is the first year he kind of feels like he feels like himself and, is in that area where he kind of feels more confident in himself. And we saw it with him winning the pole in Arlington. And then, I don't think you did this on purpose, but the link between Marcus Ericsson and Dennis Hauger is, there is chatter about, could that be Hauger's seat going forward, right? Hauger, of course, raced for Andretti Global in Indy last year when he ran through that series and won the championship there. So there are some people who are like, okay, could that be the seat that Hauger ends up filling soon, or is it going to continue to be Ericsson's seat with another contract going forward? So those two, in many ways, are linked. I think Andretti Global is kind of watching both of those drivers to see how they do. Obviously, Hauger not driving for them, but just to see how he does in his first full IndyCar season and to see if Ericsson can truly rebound and have the year we know he's capable of now in his 3rd season with Andretti Global.
Yeah, that is fascinating. That's a great point. I'm glad you brought that up because Ericsson, I believe, was on our Pit Pass live show the year he won the 500, which is fascinating. And, last year I believe he finished 2nd, and then after tech inspection, dropped back in the 500 last year. So, that's not entirely on him, but also, it's a team effort there. The interesting thing about Hauger is like they have the technical alliance too. And so, that there's a little extra there that Andretti's keeping an eye on too. Kind of similar to Malukas with Foyt last year, and now he's with Penske. So definitely a fascinating storyline to watch. Any other drivers I missed that you want to talk about?
I would say Christian Lundgaard always just kind of intrigues me. You didn't miss him, but you said his name. But just kind of like, will he be able to break through and win multiple races? Right? I think I picked him to win the pole in Arlington, and he actually didn't qualify well at all, and then was still able to get up to 7th in that race. But just seeing if he can get to that similar consistency that we talked about with his Arrow McLaren teammate, Pato O'Ward, not necessarily expecting the same amount of consistency, but just seeing if he can really break through at any point throughout this season. He's somebody I'd look at and say, where is he at as well? But you look at it because of the fact that we have Power and Dixon currently sitting right outside of the top 10, that just by nature of the series and kind of the graph of age, the aging curve throughout the series, most of those guys in the top 10 are in their 20s, right? I think outside of Newgarden and McLaughlin, I think everybody we just talked about, and Rossi's sitting there at 10. I think everybody else we just talked about is still in their 20s. So got a lot of young drivers who are still looking to prove themselves if your name isn't Alex Palou. And so it's interesting to see, kind of where this season will take all of those guys and which ones will kind of prevail and which ones may, kind of stay in that similar spot where they're still looking to break through at the end of the season.
Yeah, and he's still pretty young too.
Exactly.
Last week I joked that Jerry Jones wanted the largest racetrack, and that's why it felt like such a large course. And now we're moving to the 2.3 mile road course in Barber. You're going to get your first in-person look at it this weekend, and all 17 turns. Alex Palou was P1 in qualifying and P1 at the end. And so, he's won twice in the last 5 years. Scott McLaughlin has also won twice in the last 5 years. And so those guys have the recent history. And then, I've got a lot of numbers I can run down, but what are your initial impressions of the weekend?
I do think coming back to this track after last year where Palou set the record, I think it was a little over 16 seconds. He set the record for the longest margin of victory. Is kind of like every driver will again be looking and say, okay, let's not let that happen again this year, even if he wins necessarily, winning by that much. And it's some of the thing we saw at the beginning of this year with St. Pete. So it'll be fun and kind of intriguing to see if anybody wins the pole. I think winning the pole, I know Palou will probably still be, top 3, top 5, but even if you can win the pole and make sure that he doesn't start in first on Sunday, that might matter quite a bit when it comes to what happens at the end of the race or how the race goes on Sunday. So I think Saturday, this qualification might be the most important of the year, just given the fact that he won by so much last year after winning the pole in Barber.
Dirty air, right? Create that dirty air for him, some traffic that he has to pass through. He couldn't run away from Kyle Kirkwood in Arlington. Kirkwood undercutting him in turn 3, kind of a little bit of a surprise to go for that win, which an incredible weekend for Kirkwood in Arlington. He had such a great car. And now you're, if it's me, I'm looking at it like, okay, here comes Kirkwood. He's performed so well, but then when I looked up his Barber finishes, 21st, 12th, 10th, and 11th. So track that he hasn't necessarily figured out or performed well at so far. I mentioned it, like McLaughlin's had success here. Pato Award won it in 2022. He holds the record for fastest lap time? I just had it pulled up. Fastest race lap at 106.8182, and the fastest qualifying lap at 105.5019, both in 2021. So he's been quick there. He won it. He's the one driver. There's been 3 drivers who have won the last 5, and he's the one that hasn't won it twice. Scott Dixon's had great success here. Great success without winning. 15 starts, 6 runner-ups, and 9 podiums. So and then you've got Newgarden, who won it 3 times in 2015, 17, and 18. Will Powers won it twice in 2011 and 12 with Penske. There's a lot of history with the drivers who are going back to Barber. And I'm just fascinated to see, obviously a different dynamic, right? Powers at Andretti now. Newgarden it's been a while since he's had the success at Barber, but I think it's just going to be a fascinating weekend where, some of these drivers are starting to find continuity again now that we're 3 races in. And then, I'm really curious to see too, what the week off did. Not that they took it off, but the week off from racing did to maybe fine tune some things.
Yeah, there's a lot you said there, and I want to circle back to the Kyle Kirkwood point you made. I don't know if I picked him to win this race, right? You talked about how his history there hasn't been great. But I think what I would say to that is they've talked so much, Kirkwood and Marcus Ericsson, they've talked so much about Will Power coming to that team and helping them in areas or in races that they haven't succeeded in as a team, right? Not just in his car, but as a team. And you talked about it. Will Power has won this race twice. It was a while ago. Those were the second and third races that they had in Barber. So it was quite a bit ago when he won this race, but he understands this track clearly. I believe he's led the most laps in the history of this track throughout the 15 or the 17 years now. I think this is year 17 of the race. So you look at that and you say, okay, can Will Power's knowledge and expertise of Barber help Kyle Kirkwood and Marcus Ericsson have better finishes here than they have in the past, specifically with Kirkwood, who is now in a position where he's trying to hold on to that championship lead that he has. So I want to see that, to see how those Andretti cars perform and how they follow up their performance in Arlington 2 weeks ago. And then, yeah, you talked about it. There's quite a few drivers who have had success here, right? It's not one of those tracks where it's really been like one guy who's just been better than everybody else. Everybody's kind of had their turn in a way here. And so I think that's what makes it almost the most interesting and one of the more interesting tracks and one of the more interesting races is that you can't really predict all the time or necessarily who's going to win it just because, you look at it and everybody has had their moment or moments at Barber.
Yeah, I didn't write it down, but I think I think Graham Rahal finished second here at one point. Like I think there's a lot of different history of some guys who are here, but also to me, there's kind of like enough youth on the circuit that I don't know, did we expect Dennis Hauger to have this great start at St. Pete? No. So do one of those guys figure it out, obviously Mick Schumacher is more of a veteran driver, but has he figured some things out now that he's been in testing and kind of gotten a feel for how the weekends go and getting a little bit better feel for the IndyCar? He hasn't had a great start to the year, obviously, last in the standings, but I'm just really curious too, how the young guys who haven't been here, how they play a factor into all of this.
That's a good point. And with Mick Schumacher, it's been so odd his start to the year because you say he's last in the standings, and that's factually correct. He wrecks one lap in, or not even a lap in, on the first lap of that race in St. Pete to no fault of his own, right? There's nothing he could do there. Qualifies well in Phoenix, but the first time he ever has raced on an oval, so the actual race didn't go quite as well as qualifying did, and he fall back there. And then Arlington, he did finish in 22nd, and that was just not a great weekend overall for him. So he is still, I would say, a wild card within this race and the next few races until we really get a good grasp on just what that car and just what Mick Schumacher are able to do in IndyCar this year. And so I look at him and I say, yeah, what can he do? And like you said, the younger drivers, even a guy like Louis Foster, last year's Rookie of the Year, who, has had an up and down start this year, I'd say, hasn't given us a moment yet to necessarily bring up his name often, whether it be on this podcast or in any sort of writing or anything. So it's like, you look at somebody like him, like, hey, can you get a top 10 or even maybe a top 5 finish? So it'll be fun to see which young drivers, which of the, super young drivers may have a good week here, or if all of them maybe continue to struggle as well. I'm not sure.
Nolan Siegel's chance to shine, prove everybody wrong.
Who knows?
He's had
it's weird. It's weird. He's not a rookie or anything, but Nolan Siegel is still the youngest driver in the field, right? That feels weird to say, but because he's been around for a few years now. But I believe he's still younger than anybody else here.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not going to try to figure it out in my head because I don't have the answer.
No, I've got it. He is the youngest. He's a little younger than Dennis, who is just turned 23, I believe, earlier this month. And Nolan is not yet 23.
Wow, amazing! Have to throw him a party when they hit the big 2-3, the Jordan year, the LeBron year.
There we go.
What else you got? Are you ready to make a pick?
Yeah, I don't know if I have much else. I'm excited for this race, and I think a lot of drivers are. I want to know if this finally getting this week off meant anything. Like I mentioned, a lot of these drivers didn't actually have the week off, right? The guys like Kirkwood and Palou were in Sebring, racing in the 12 hours of Sebring this past week, so a lot of these guys were still driving. But the teams and the crews got a week off, and even Sebring. I talked to Kyle Kirkwood about Sebring back in Arlington. He was like, "That's not like." It's it's fun and all, and it is work, but he told me it's not stressful for him in the same way that an IndyCar race may be stressful at times. So just to get that breather from the IndyCar series could mean a lot to a lot of these drivers and teams. So I want to see if that affects anything, and if we do see one of these guys who maybe even hasn't finished top 10 this year or maybe not top 5 or on the podium yet, if we can see one of those guys potentially even win the race or at least get up there to that top 5 or podium level.
All right, I guess it's time to make a pick, huh?
Let's do it. You want me to go first?
I'll give you the honors as the leader in the clubhouse.
All right. Well, I am going to pick someone who's won here already, as you talked about, and someone who I think he thinks and I think would have had a very good chance in Arlington if not for what happened in qualifying. I'm going with Scott McLaughlin. The guy who had won the last 2 before last year when Alex Palou took this race. But I look at Scott McLaughlin and I say he's been strong. He has been strong through most of the first 3 weekends, and you take out that error he had where he crashed and had to start all the way back in 25th 2 weeks ago in Arlington. If you look at everything else, every other practice or qualifying session, he's been very good. That car's been very good, and I think he'll stay out of trouble. He'll avoid an issue like that this weekend, and I am going to pick him to win. And once again, everybody, before turning it back over to Aaron, he has picked the last two races correctly. So don't listen to me. Listen to whatever is about to come out of Aaron's mouth.
I'm picking these things like I picked my March Madness bracket, and it's kind of just all vibes. Like I told you before we even started, I don't even know who I'm picking yet, and it's been 25 minutes or so, and I still was looking at my sheet, and I'm just like, I don't know. I kind of feel like this guy might win it. Like, so I don't know that you want to follow my picks, although my process has been pretty good, evidently. No, honestly, I love McLaughlin too, but I'm not going to take him since you took him, just for the fun of it all, I guess. I'm going to go with Papaya. I'm going to go with Pato. I think he gets it done. The history, both in 2021 with his lap times and then also winning it in 2022. Obviously, he's got good history here. He's been running consistently. You could argue he's been the most consistent driver this season, just from, his fourth, fifth. Like, it's kind of hard to top that. I think I said this earlier, but like, I'm also just like really curious about how Scott Dixon and Will Power do, just because they also have good history here. And for all the reasons we talked about for kind of how their season's going. So I'm going to stick with Pato Award though. He's been very nice. Met him a couple times, this offseason. And I'm going to say Aaron McLaren gets to hoist a trophy in Alabama.
That'd be something. Again, I think it continued the excitement of the start of this year. If you had a fourth driver from a fourth different team win a race, I think that would be incredible, right? I picked a fourth driver, but of course, Team Penske already run with Newgarden. But if we truly got to a start where we had those four guys all coming from different teams winning, it would just be like complete madness, right? I'd have to go back and look if that's really ever happened, because it's definitely got to be rare. But those are the four marquee teams, I'd say, right now, and each of them are in a legitimate chance to win this championship.
It is March. There is madness. As I read in IndyCar's Fast Facts this week, they had a little March Madness line since they have four races in the calendar month of March. Just kind of an epic month. I know they took the week off last week, but I'm really curious to see what the TV draw is in the middle of all this, in the middle of an Elite Eight weekend with the NCAA tournament. I'm curious to see what the eyeballs look like. I'm fascinated clearly by the storylines of this race, and I look forward to following you and your coverage and reporting of it. You can follow Zion on social media, but especially he takes you behind the scenes, off track, on the YouTube page, IndyStar TV /IndyCar, and you can find driver interviews. He's talked to Ron Rzuski earlier in the year. He gives his own analysis from each day. Like, there's a little bit of everything. And so highly recommend you go like and subscribe to the YouTube page. You can find this podcast there. Obviously, read IndyStar.com. Please subscribe. We love that. So we can keep doing fun stuff and sending Zion to all of the places that IndyCar fans also fancy themselves to. So Zion, safe travels. Good luck to you and your coverage. And I'll let you take us out of here.
All right. Well, this has been yet again another episode of the Inside Line. For Aaron Ferguson, I'm Zion Brown. Thank you so much for listening.